All right, so the next visual type that I want to introduce is the gauge chart. And gauges are a great visual to use when you want to compare a value against something like a goal or a target or a benchmark. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. And to demo these gauge charts, we're actually going to jump into our product detail report page for the very first time. Now remember, the objective for this particular page was to show performance for a specific product. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is add a slicer first with the product names. And I'm not worried too much about the styling or formatting here. I'm going to drop it kind of right up in the top left corner. This is temporary for now, but what this will allow us to do is select any specific product and then build our visuals based on that filter context. So our game plan here is to create 3 gauge charts right here at the top of the report page to show performance in terms of orders, revenue, and profit. And if you remember, in the DAX section of the course, we created target measures for each of those metrics based on the previous month's performance plus 10%. And that's going to help our end users understand the context behind the values they're seeing. Are these numbers good? Are they bad? Are they ahead of expectations? Are we falling behind? And so on. So gauge charts, again, are a great tool when you're trying to show that type of context in terms of performance against a goal. So first things first, let's start with total orders. We're going to drag in a gauge chart. It's this icon that almost looks like a speedometer here. And for this one, our value is going to be total orders. Let's go ahead and drop it in. But note that we're seeing the total orders overall for our entire time period for this specific product. What we really want is total orders for the current month so that we can compare against our order target measure, which was based on the previous month. And to do that, we're going to use a handy top N filter. So let's go ahead and with this visual selected, I'm going to drill into my filter pane, pop into my data view. I'm going to grab that start of month field and add a new visual level filter. We're going to use top N, and I only want to show cases where the month is in the top 1 start of month latest. So what that's going to do is filter this visual based on the single latest start of month. In other words, the current month of data. So let's go ahead and apply that filter. See the numbers update. Now we're looking at 232 orders of this logo cap for the month of June 2022. Now, the way this works is that the gauge chart will kind of anchor the current value halfway through the gauge by default and set a maximum value double the current value, in this case 464. But in most cases, you don't want that default behavior. Where this becomes more valuable is when you can drop in fields into the maximum or target value panes for the gauge. So let me show you what the target value looks like. And remember, we've got that order target measure right here. And when I add that, look what it does. It's still anchored the current value midway through the gauge, but now we see that marker, that indicator to show us how this value, 232, compares against our target. So in this case, we're actually slightly ahead of target. If we look at the bike stand, we're well behind target. The target is actually off the chart. You can see some other ones here like the medium classic vest and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and look at the logo cap again here. The other way that we could potentially compare a value against the target is to use the maximum value here. And what that's going to do is it's going to put the target on the max here in the lower right corner of the visual so that the gauge essentially fills up until it hits that target. So in this case, we've exceeded it, so the gauge is full. In other cases, you can see that we're just behind. I actually like this view because personally, I think it's more intuitive to show that gauge filling up as opposed to anchoring the current value at the midway point. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with this approach. Feel free to take whichever style or approach you'd like. But now we've done our building, we've done our filtering, we've configured everything we need. Last step is to do some formatting just to get this styled, and then we should be good to go. So let's jump into our format pane. First things first, let's add a nice descriptive title here, like monthly orders versus target. And we'll use our standard title formats, Seago UI, size 10, centered above the visual. There we go. Kind of resize things just a bit here. Next up, let's adjust the colors. I want that fill to be that consistent dark gray. We're not using the target field in this case, so we can leave that as is. Data labels and the target label, kind of these numbers here, look pretty good to me. Maybe we drop them down a little bit, so maybe from a 12 to a 10. Target label, 12 to a 10. And the last thing I want to do is really draw a bit more attention to that callout value. That's the current value right here in the middle of the gauge. And for that one, we're going to use our Seago UI bold font in our default dark gray. And I think all of the other default settings and formats look good. So with that, we've got this one fully configured for orders. Let's go ahead and copy, create two more versions. One's going to be for revenue, one's going to be for profit. And let's kind of just rough them into position here. I'm going to shift to select everything, head to format, align the top, and distribute horizontally. So we'll play with the positioning a little bit more later on, but so far this looks good. Now all we need to do is update each of these to show the correct metrics. So now instead of total orders, this one's going to show total revenue. And instead of order target, you guessed it, we want the revenue target. There we go. Formatting and everything looks great. Don't need to change anything with my top end filter. Only other update we need to make is the chart title itself. And instead of monthly orders, now we're looking at monthly revenue. That one's done. Last one here. This is going to be our profit. So let's go ahead and add total profit compared against our profit target. Okay, and we'll update the title to monthly profit versus target. And there we go. So now if we change some of these selections, we should see these all adjusting accordingly. Again, such a great way to add some context to the visuals and really draw attention to performance against our targets.